Okay, welcome back, everyone. Um, and probably most of y'all didn't go away. I did. Took a little break, sipped on a little water. So this is segment two, where we're going to go back into the survey a little bit, one question at a time, and give an overview of some of the things we have in mind to care for uh, what the racers were looking for from based on our initial findings from the survey. Again, part three is going to be in a deep dive into the data and the individual comments and things like that. So realistically, this will be a kind of a big picture overview of what we have in mind for uh, for caring for what the racers are looking for based on these survey results. But we will have some detail uh, to throw into the mix as well. Going back to question one, when was the last time you raced cross country? Again, the basic result was yes, we have some active racers right now, but it really looks like most of the racers have been out of the racing habit for some time. Quite a few over 6 months, and quite a few of those over a year, basically going back to pre COVID times. So we think it's pretty important to help people get back into racing form, just doing that type of riding. But it also, realistically, for most people, it doesn't make sense just to dive in off the deep end. And if you were a strong Cat 2 racer, but you haven't raced in 18 months, it's not realistic to expect somebody to come back to that form right away. So we're gonna try to find some ways to help people ratchet their fitness back up, their racing skills back up, just get back into the groove a little bit. And we have a couple different ways in mind to do that. First off, we've got a hard date, we think. Paperwork's being finalized right now. Hopefully, we can announce the details on it in the next day or two. But August 28th, we're gonna do a formal Spinistry summer mountain bike race bash thing. So put that on your calendars. That's a goal, something to shoot for. August 28th. We do recognize that that's the heat of August, but there's also plenty of time in between now and then to get heat acclimated. And obviously, we'll do things as early in the morning as possible. And we're doing our best to find a trail that best accommodates heat of the day, or, well, heat of August type racing. If we're doing it early in the day, fantastic. Um, so that's gonna be a traditional, open to the general public mountain bike cross country race. We're going to have as many groups and categories and everything like that as possible for that one. What we're also going to do in the interim between now, the towards the end of June and the end of August, whenever we can squeeze it in, we're going to do club spinistry training rides and events and time trials and things like that. So the idea is kind of along the lines of pop-up time trials and pop-up training races or group rides or things like that. The idea being, if you're a club spinistry member, you're, we're insured, so we can gather as a group and go out there and race. We wouldn't charge you for that. I mean, that would just be part of your membership benefit sort of thing. So, like right now, uh, tentatively have it planned for Sunday morning. Could possibly do it Monday afternoon or evening if that's what people prefer, or possibly even both. I have the time available this upcoming weekend. We just did a race at River Legacy. We have a pretty cool loop laid out there that works really well for racing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a club spinistry time trial at River Legacy. Just show up, realistically between the hours of 7:30 and 10:30 Sunday morning, or if everyone determines that Monday evening is better, we'll, say between 5:30 and 8:30 Monday evening, and we'll have the timing set up, and it's really informal. Show up whenever it fits into your schedule. Go out and do a time trial, and you can compare your times to the racers that we had. You can also use that as a benchmark for down the road, because we realistically will probably go out to River Legacy again and do another time trial between now and August as well. But also along the same vein, the we can do practice races, and since we're not charging entry fees or anything like that, it's no different than a group ride, people going out meeting up at the same time, and riding a trail together at the same time for speed. I mean, obviously you want to be courteous to the other trail users or anything like that. This isn't meant to be a competition. It's meant to get everybody back in the groove. But for the when we're doing these, we can do the chip timing and stuff like that. We can do that on the fly fairly easily. We can get official times. You can race and ride side by side with other people, and that just kind of helps you get in the groove. So we're going to be doing these pop-up time trials and some mini races as well. Along those lines, not a Club Spinistry member, don't have any ambition to be a Club Spinistry member. We're not trying to twist anyone's arm into doing that. Sean's doing the DFW Summer Series right now. That's a fantastic way to get back into racing as well. Every Thursday night at Irwin. He's taken a couple weeks off. I think the first couple weeks of July as a break between the two segments. But then every Thursday night, through the first half of August, they have DFW Summer Series races as well. So that's a fantastic way to get back in the groove. Realistically, those couple weeks that Sean's taking off there, we'll probably throw in probably on that same Thursday night. We'll probably go ahead and I think it does fit into our schedule. I'll have to look at it a little bit more in depth. That Wednesday or Thursday night, we'll probably do some of our pop-up group races the weeks that DFW Summer Series isn't going. No, we're not trying to get hundreds of people out or anything like that, but we're just trying to keep everyone's momentum. So basically between June and the end of August, between the Club Spinistry rides, time trials, and training races, and the DFW Summer Series, there's a lot of options for people to start getting back in the groove. And by us setting that date of August 28th and saying, hey, we're going to do a mountain bike race on this date, then you have a goal to shoot for, a training plan to meet, and things like that. Again, recognizing that there's a huge chunk of people that haven't really raced in 6 months to a year and a half that are interested in racing. We're going to help you all get back in the groove. Obviously, that big chunk of folks that are already active racers, they're in good shape right now, or at least going in the right direction. And we've definitely seen some really strong racers at the past couple of events that are trained up and ready to go now. But I'm guessing you give it between June and August, the field can equalize fairly well for a good sized event. What is the most important factor for choosing a race to attend? The trail being raced and close to home. So again, I'm not trying to keep a secret. It's just not appropriate for me to say, hey, this is the trail we're going to use for our August 28th race until it's official and final. And as soon as it is official, we'll share that information. But we are definitely trying to make it a trail that traditionally in the past people have liked to race on, and it is convenient for a large chunk of the Metro Mess. Obviously there's no single trail that's going to be equally convenient to everyone. But we tried to find a trail that would get a good chunk of the people that would be most interested in racing. And we also think it's a trail that's going to be appropriate, again, for racing in August as well. Who is your preferred racing competition? People who race at the same skill level was by far the biggest component of that. People who race in the same age group was second, but it was obviously heavily skewed towards people of the same racing ability. That's part of why we're wanting to do the Club Spinistry time trials and training races. And I'll show more detail. We'll share some links, not right now with this video, but throughout the week. So what we've been doing on the gravel side of things, we're kind of creating racing categories, not like USA Cycling though, where it's a skill based cat up based on how many times you started or how many times you've podiumed and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that approach. We're just saying this one's different. We've been doing it in our gravel groups, and it's 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 got some legs. This works really well. It's going to take a little bit of refining. It's just going to take more people and more events to pull the data together. So basically what we do is we take the results from each race, see who finished and what speed, average speed, what time, so forth, and we group those people together basically based on their fitness level currently, their skill level currently. For lack of a better term, if you're a 16 mile an hour average racer for 100K, we're going to put you in a group of other people that are about that same speed in their racing ability. And it's it's we call it gender neutral racing, because if you're a 16 mile an hour racer, you're a 16 mile an hour racer. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female or whatever, you're a 16 mile an hour racer. That said, we can still break out the results. So people that were racing in that 16 mile an hour group, we can break down the results by people that are male or female, or people that are, in a specific age group. Our caveat on that is we've never been a fan of super drilling down the categories where, well, there's only two people racing that race, so somebody's guaranteed a podium. Generally speaking, we try to put our racing groups together where there needs to be at least 6 racers to break it down into a subcategory that's going to recognize a top finisher. It needs to be at least 10 to create a full podium. That's very loose, because we'll have events where there's 20 people that signed up for a category, but it's bad weather, or we move, like we talked about in the previous segment, we moved the date. We kind of ran into this with River Legacy this past weekend. That was a race that we had an original date that got rained out, so this was the makeup date. So even though we had almost 130 people signed up, only about 90 or 92 of them actually raced. So we had a lot of no-shows. So what we had thought were going to be racing categories going into the weekend ended up there, instead of 12 people racing in that category, and we thought we'd have a full podium, there were only 4 people in that specific age group, or what. For racing categories and a full podium and things like that, it's important for everybody to be racing against other people. We're not believers in creating a category just so somebody can be guaranteed to win it. If you're the only left-handed person with red hair over 250 pounds riding a single speed with a flat tire, we're not going to create a category for that, if that makes sense. But that said, if there are a lot of women racing single speed in a particular speed group, that we could turn that into a category that gets its own award. So just something to think about, and just a kind of high level thought process there. Realistically, probably what our initial break is going to be is, again, based on speed. And what's going to start determining that is results from this River Legacy race, results from our time trials, results from our practice races, results from the DFW Summer Series. And what we can do is create a database of, well, these are the racers that we're saying are in these group levels. And we do basically 1 to 5, with 5 being the fastest and 1 being the least fastest. And even if you don't do a time trial or a practice race or DFW Summer Series, but if you're an experienced racer and you ride with this person on a rig, if you know that Sue Smith is pretty comparable in talent to me and skill to me, then you can sign up for that same group that Sue Smith is in. So that's kind of the general idea of how it breaks down. And it's just a matter of building the data. Will we have it all built by the August race? No. But we should have a pretty good chunk of it laid out to at least give people a rough idea what group they should be racing in, sort of thing. And going back to the additional next level of break. So if we have 25 people racing in group 3, we definitely have age breaks that fit into that as well. So usually what we do when there's a big enough group, we do the awards based on overall within the group, the top 3. And then after those top 3, who are the overall winners for everybody of every age, every gender, whatever else, then we'll break it down into age segments. And then in those age segments, if there's enough racers in each of those age segments, we may break it down into female and male, if that's what the racers want. Or we may make a female-male designation first, if that's what everyone wants. We kind of go where the crowd wants things to go and where the signups and the registrations justify. Ultimately, if there's only 3 women racing in a specific group, we can't do a women's category and age breaks in a women's category on top of that sort of thing. Single speed, fat bike, kind of along the same lines. Realistically, if you're a single speeder and you want us to have a single speed category, tell you what, you find 5 other single speeders, and even if everybody's a different skill level, but they agree they want to race each other as single speed, as long as we have at least 6 single speeders, we'll go ahead and create that single speed category or fat bike category or tandem category. We could even do a unicycle category. What we're not able to do, and this isn't an editorial on our end, we do not have the capability, even if e-bikes are allowed on the trails that we're racing, we're not able to have an e-bike category. Our insurance does not allow for any motorized transportation of any kind, and we've had these discussions with our insurance carrier, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. E-bikes are not covered by our insurance. So unfortunately for the e-bike races, we're not able to accommodate e-bike racers at this time. It doesn't mean we won't be able to in the future. It's just something that we're not able to care for at this time. The next question was, what is your preferred race duration? 60 minutes or less was a very small percentage of the group. The meat and potatoes is 1 to 3 hour racing, and that's fairly easy to accommodate. And it would also reflect on the skill levels. Realistically, probably our 1s and 2s might be closer to 90 minutes or less, but our 3s may be closer to 2 hours, and our 4s and 5s might be 2.5 to 3 hours. But there is definitely a segment of the racing population that's still interested in the longer events. And my gut right now, all this stuff right now is just throwing stuff up against the wall to see what sticks for us and the racers and things like that. Generally speaking, if we have a venue, we're going to be there most of the day anyway for various reasons. It's not a big deal for us to throw an endurance component, an endurance group in there as well if we're doing traditional XC racing. The biggest drawback on that is the overlap between the different races. So that's something we have to think about. We have to make sure it's cared for properly. But the general thought process is going to be, if there's an interest in whenever we're at one of our official mountain bike races, for lack of a better term, if we're having the 1 to 3 hour format, we'll probably have an endurance format in the mix as well. Maybe 4 hours, maybe 6 hours, maybe 100-miler specifically, sort of thing. It'll vary based on venue and event and things like that. But but we'll usually have an endurance format as well. But there may be races that are just traditional cross country, and there may be other races that are just endurance focused only. So we're not going away from endurance races, but most of the time we think we should be able to combine the formats on the same race date. Appropriate awards for cross country racers. Again, like we were talking about in the initial thoughts from the data itself, it looks like we're kind of in the right realm of making sure everybody's got food and drink and a good social atmosphere after the race. And typically, the way we do our races, it does allow for a good bit of mingling and socializing between the different race groups. We do race on an overlap basis most of the time, not necessarily where everyone necessarily starts at exactly the same time, but they may all be on the trail at the same time. And the way the faster riders are faster finishing thereabouts the same time. I bring that up because I do know that there's a lot of, particularly the higher level racers, they're used to finishing their race and 5 minutes later getting their podium picture and leaving. That's just not the way we do it. Yes, we're going to get to awards as quickly as we can, but particularly when we're doing the overlap and things like that, it's probably not appropriate for us to, hey, the top three are in, but we've still got 30 people out in that group, in that distance or whatever. And we may not have quite frankly, the capability to run the reports and things like that. May mean shutting down the computer and the timing clock and things like that. Plan to, if you're coming to our cross country races, plan to make a morning of it. Plan to make a day of it. Plan to hang out afterwards and have cold drinks and food. And we're always going to have that. We're always going to have cold drinks and food of some sort for the after race social get together. We'll try to provide a nice pavilion or gathering spot or whatever else. And the reality is kind of what's going to dictate what level of food. Hey, is it just going to be some chips and snacks and cold drinks? Or is it going to be cold drinks and beer if it's allowed at the facility, and bring in some pizzas or whatever? What's going to dictate that is, quite frankly, it's going to be the size of the crowd. If more people register, that means there's more funds that can be spent on those sorts of things. And we're not saying that to say, oh, we got to have at least this many people to get pizza. We build the events based on, well, here's what our minimum cost is going to be to put it on. And we know we're going to buy at least this much stuff for food and drink and snacks. And then, in order to pull that off, we need this many racers. And typically the way it works, if we say, hey, we need at least 75 racers to make that work. If it gets to the point where we've got 100 racers, hey, fantastic. Tell you what, we'll go ahead and we'll move up we'll get a little bit nicer food in the mix or whatever. So what I'm leaning towards at the moment, and your comments are sincerely welcome on this. What I'm leaning towards at the moment is kind of combining this glory and honor for the winners and food and drink for all with medals as kind of our base level. So if you show up for the race, you know that there's going to be food and drink afterwards, and the more people that show up, the better the food and drink is. And you know that if you win your race, you're going to get recognition and a medal at least of some sort. And so the idea being, the food and drink's always there. The more racers, the higher up the level of food and drink goes. The medals will always be there. The higher number of racers, the more revenue that comes in. Then we can move it up to, well, hey, for this one, maybe we can get some trophies made for it, sort of thing, for the podium winners, things like that. And then if something blows up and turns into a really big race, 250, 300 racers, something like that. I'm not saying that's our goal. I'm just saying if we start getting into those levels and there are more funds to work with at that point, and maybe we can look at throwing in cash awards in the mix for the highest level racers or something like that. And, maybe we can get, really fancy with the food, or, get some, really, really good beer or even wine in there. Who knows, if it's appropriate for the venue. So that's kind of the logic there. We're always going to combine at least snacks and cold drinks and medals. And just kind of figure, hey, if we have at least 75 racers, it's going to be snacks and cold drinks and medals. If we get over 100 racers, we'll start ratcheting things up, sort of thing. Is kind of the logic behind that. And nothing's perfect. There's other pieces that do come into place. Some venues are more expensive than others. Sometimes we have to rent a bunch of porta johns, and anybody that's ever been in the promotions industry, putting on bicycle events, knows how much of a headache the porta john aspect of things is. But that's the general plan there. Next question is, what is a reasonable entry fee for a well-organized race with an appropriate field for you to race against? No doubt about it. $35 to $50 is what the survey response said is the sweet spot. And pretty much everyone that had comments said kind of the same thing. Well, it varies depending on the quality of the race, the quality of the venue, the quality of the awards. We get that. The best way to explain it is at least the way we do it at Spinistry, when our pricing varies from one race to the other, it's not because, hey, we think we can get more for this race. No, it's because our costs are different. There's sometimes we can put on a race and the venue costs are $50 and that's it. Hey, fantastic. Typically, we pass that savings on to the racers. If we have a really low venue cost, then typically our race fees are going to be lower as well. Typically, when you see a higher racing fee, if you see $50 instead of $35, typically that means the venue itself was more expensive, or requirements of the venue were more expensive. We had to hire police to be on site. We had to bring in porta johns in addition to the restrooms that were there that we're paying for a costlier venue or thing. Typically, when you see that variance in price, at least for the Spinistry events, that's the driver on it, is the venue cost that works into the mix. Which, to be perfectly honest, some people said they're willing to pay up to $75. We could have some $75 events. That's not part of the plan right now. We're not going, oh, hey, we're going to do this one for 75. Actually, it's kind of the opposite. So it's part of the reason I'm pulling my punches a little bit, but I'll let this slip. The current plan, assuming our paperwork goes through and everything's approved for April 28th, the current plan would be for that event to be definitely no more than 50, probably $40 or $45. When you are a Club Spinistry member, we always give a discount to our events to Club Spinistry members. Sometimes it's $10, sometimes it's 25%, sometimes it's as much as 50%. There's different reasons for that. The core one is we can always give a discount because once you're a Club Spinistry member, your insurance cost for all of your events during your membership is already covered. It's not like going to a USA Cycling event or something like that where the promoter has to pay insurance for each rider each and every event. When you're a Club Spinistry member, you're insured for all of our events, whether they're races, formal races like this, or the club rides like I was talking about for the time trials or practice races. So we don't have to pay an additional insurance on a per racer user to somebody that's already a Club Spinistry member. So we're always able to pass that savings on to Club Spinistry members. But in turn, we do like to thank people for becoming members. So along those lines, and again, this isn't a sales pitch. This isn't trying to get people who have no idea what Club Spinistry is and never been interested in it to join Club Spinistry. This is for the idea that for people that have kind of been on the fence for it, and it's like, well, not really into gravel, but mountain biking, Spinistry stuff might make it worth my while. What we're going to do for this one, assuming all the paperwork works out and we get our permit and everything like that, Club Spinistry members will actually get to race this August race at no additional charge. That'll be part of their membership, as well as the practice races and time trials leading up to it. And we're doing that to show good faith on our part, that if anybody that joins Club Spinistry specifically for mountain biking not has no interest in gravel, I get that. It's not for everybody. We want them to know that we're going to make sure that they do get their money's worth out of their Club Spinistry membership. That's one of the big things we've always focused on for all of our Club Spinistry members. We don't want people joining just to save $15 for one event. We want people to feel confident that they're going to get their money's worth out of their Club Spinistry membership. So that's the plan currently, is no more than $45 sign up fee for this August race, and Club Spinistry members will get in free if everything works out as currently planned. And hopefully we have that nailed down by the end of this week. Future races. So the kind of the idea that we're shooting for. Let's see what my next question. No, that's comments. Okay. So kind of the idea that we're shooting for right now is to try to do one formal mountain bike race each month, which quite frankly we've tried to do in the past, and COVID definitely got in the way of it. Weather regularly gets in the way of it, and so that's why we say it's a scheduled event. We may say, hey, this is our racing weekend for November of 2021, but we may not say, but it's going to be at this trail yet, because it may very well end up that we have a trail lined up for October that gets rained out, and it just makes sense to move that to the slot we already had for November. So we may rough sketch things and say, hey, here's the trail we plan to be on in September, and this is the one we hope to be on in October. But just like I said, there's a 50-50 shot that any of these mountain bike races we schedule are going to have to be moved because of weather or trail conditions or whatever else. And typically what we're going to do, if it's available, is just move, if October gets rained out, we'll move the October venue to November, the slot we have there. But we're going to go back to the focus will be, for the most part, what was the question? Yeah. Most important factor for choosing a race to attend, the trail being raced and close to home. All of the trails we have in mind for our monthly Real Deal racing are, with potentially the exception of one, and we'll go more in depth at a more appropriate time on that one, are very DFW metro centric. They're in the confines of the Metroplex, and generally speaking, easily accessible for a large part of the racing audience, and also the trails that people typically want to race. I know there's a few trails out there that can be used for racing from time to time, but people aren't too keen on using those, and maybe they're not in areas that people want to go race, even though they may not be terribly far away. We're going to try to focus on, generally speaking, the trails people want to go to when it's feasible. I'll be honest with you, there are trails that I know people want to go to that just aren't feasible for us to use in this format. And I'm not going to go into any details on it, but there's some that the costs are just prohibitive. Be it from the city or a private landowner, where there's just too many pieces to juggle, and it's just us putting too much on the line, too much at risk. Because like I said in that segment one, the reality is putting on mountain bike races is not a moneymaker or we can't rely on it to be a moneymaker, I guess is a better way to phrase it. But it is something we're passionate about. But we do have to make a point to not lose money on them. Do we want to make money? Sure. but the main thing is to not lose money on them. If we can fulfill our passion and help support mountain bike racing, and the net of it is it's our costs are covered and everybody has a good time. We're happy with that because we have a good time putting on mountain bike races. But we're not going to overcommit on financial obligations. Just to be perfectly frank, if the only way we can have a race at this certain venue is that we have to obligate ourselves to $3,000 or $4,000 of upfront costs that we may never get back, that's just not going to happen. But that said, we're not scared to try new things as well. So I think that wraps up segment two. Again, like I said in the introduction, the vast majority, you guys have probably already heard more than you want to hear. You don't need any more detail. There might be a small slice of the people paying attention to this that do want to see the detailed comments here or see what other people are saying or, well, Kevin, you kind of talked about this on a very high level point. I don't understand how that really comes into play. I assure you, in some of these comments, we're going to treat them like an Ask Spinistry question. Somebody's going to have a comment, hey, Spinistry, why don't you do things like this instead of that? And what I'll do is address those comments one at a time and go through it. There's a lot of comments here, so that's going to be a lot of information. Most of y'all have no interest in it whatsoever. Those of you that are interested in that, I'm just going to be upfront and honest and tell it like it is, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there'll be some things that I'm mistaken about. And there's going to be some things that are going to click for people that ask those questions. Oh, I never thought of that. That makes sense now. And that's what we're shooting for. Not saying we've thought of everything over the years, but the vast majority of it we've come across, and we do things the way we do for certain reasons, and we're going to try to shine a light on that. So we're going to go ahead and stop segment two, take another break, and we'll record segment three, but it will just come up immediately